Action.
So guys, where we are right now, we're in the middle of the Ile de la Cité. There's some really important buildings behind me. One of them is Sainte-Chapelle, the other is Palais de Justice, and the other one is the Conciergerie. Now the reason that this is a really important part of the city is because this is where all the kings of France lived up until the middle of the 14th century. So even back in Roman times, the Romans had built their administrative buildings right here on this spot, primarily because it's a really good vantage point for the river. And then when Clovis comes into power, he's going to build on those Roman foundations, and then the kings of France will literally stay here until Charles V in the middle of the 14th century when he moves to the Louvre. Now, if you want to get this into some kind of chronological order, you can say when Charles V moves to the Louvre, this is a big move, because then all the kings of France are going to live in the Louvre for a couple hundred years. Then after that, when Louis XIV becomes the king, they're going to move out to Versailles, and they're going to live at Versailles and completely disconnect themselves from Paris. And that's inevitably going to lead to the monarch, downfall of the monarch. So, I want to talk about the Sainte-Chapelle first. I want to talk about a king named Louis IX. He's also known as Saint Louis, because he will become canonized. Now, Louis IX was quite a funny character. He was brought up by his mother. He was kind of a mama's boy, Blanche de Castile. She was this very conservative Catholic Spanish woman. She would say things to him like, "I would rather see you dead than commit a mortal sin." She was very, very pious, and she brought him up very, 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 very religious. So when he became king, he kept all these really crazy things. He was one of the great neurotics of history, someone said. He actually would, when he'd go to bed, he would genuflect 50 times. He would say 50 Hail Marys. He would wear horsehair shirts to kind of repent for his sins. He was a very skinny, gaunt man, very sickly because he was never eating. He was always fasting to get closer to God. So he was literally obsessed. Some of his critics, some of the other nobles, said he is not the king of France, but the king of priests, because he was actually known to wash the feet of the nobility, which was very, very, very strange back then, but very, very strange in general. So one of his very, very favorite things to do was wage crusades. So he will embark on a lot of crusades to recapture the Holy Land. And on one of these crusades, he meets with the Emperor of Constantinople, Badwin II. Now, Badwin II gives him a proposition. He says, "Hey, Louis IX, I know you're a really religious man. How about you buy the crown of thrones of Christ from me?" And Louis IX says, "Okay, what's the price?" The price was very, very high. In fact, the price he paid for the crown of thrones was 4 times the price he's going to pay to build that cathedral. And so he buys it, but Badwin, to make him feel better, he throws in a couple nails and parts of the cross to make Louis IX happy. So when he's about to give the money, Louis IX realizes that Badwin II doesn't even have the crown of thorns. It's actually in Venice. So he has to go to Venice and pay even more money for it. And when they bring it back, there's this huge procession where Louis IX actually dressed like Christ, and he actually walks it into the treasury barefoot and dressed in a tunic like Christ. So, very, very strange man. But once he gets these relics, he realizes, well, like, where am I going to keep them? So they keep them in the treasury for a while, but in the meanwhile, he commissions Sainte-Chapelle to be built. And this is to house all the relics from the Holy Land. Now you're probably thinking, Crown of Christ, this is the 13th century. How is it possible that someone kept this? I agree, it's very, very circumspect. I don't really believe that these things are real, but maybe they are, you can't really say. But after he builds the chapel, he's going to acquire even more relics. He's going to acquire the dagger that finally killed Christ. He's going to acquire the mats that he washed the people's feet with. A lot of crazy things. In Bruges, actually, they have the blood of Christ still. And in Naples, they actually have the breast milk of the Virgin Mary. So, I mean, these are crazy times, but you got to make a dollar. You also have to have something that connects you to God. And so he puts these in the Sainte-Chapelle, and he finishes Sainte-Chapelle actually just in 6 years. Compared to the 200 years that Notre Dame takes, Sainte-Chapelle only takes 6 years. Now, if you guys have time, I highly, highly, highly recommend going into Saint-Chapelle. It is absolutely beautiful, especially on a sunny day. The sun rays shine in, and you just get this, you really get that feeling like I was talking about, that you are in the presence of a deity, presence of God. Great, great deal. Also, if you do want to go in, you can get tickets at the Conciergerie, and you can do a dual ticket. It's 15 euros. It's a 2-day pass, so you can go in each one. It doesn't take long to go in either, but they're very, very interesting. Now, the Conciergerie is actually the old palace. So when you go in there, you enter into the guards room, and the guards room is actually from medieval times. So also got the vaulted ceilings, like I was talking about, that are very typical of Gothic architecture. So cool to go in there. What happens in the Conciergerie is after Charles V leaves, he leaves it in charge of a concierge. That's where we get the name, Conciergerie. It will become an administrative center for the city, and then in the dungeon, it's actually going to become one of the most famous jails in French history. So, by the 15th century, it's a jail. It's not a jail as you would imagine today. It's actually a bit different. It depends on how much money you have. If you got a lot of money and you're in jail, then it's a pretty sweet place to be, because you get a nice room. You can buy yourself a desk, some writing material, have a nice bed, eat chickens, drink wine, and you get a pretty nice deal. If you are poor, you go to the basement where it's dank and sickly, and you probably most likely will get the plague or some kind of other infectious disease. And those are called the oubliettes because it's a forgotten. Yeah, it's a very, very, very bad place. The Conciergerie will become even more infamous during the Revolution, because it will house all the famous revolutionaries right before they go to the guillotine. Actually, the Revolutionary Tribunal is going to set itself up at the Palace of Justice, and right before you go into trial, you actually have to stay a little bit in the Conciergerie. So if you might have heard of some of its famous residents, Robespierre was actually interned here, and Marie Antoinette, Danton, the Duchess of Berry. So you have a lot of very, very famous people that were actually interred in the jail. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at our next stop when I tell you guys about the French Revolution. So let's mosey on to the next spot.